the man everyone ignored, until he ordered the room emptied. No one noticed the photographer when he walked into the ballroom. Not at first. He moved quietly, almost deliberately blending into the background, dressed in dark jeans, a worn leather jacket, and boots scuffed enough to suggest years of travel. His hair was slightly unkempt, streaked with gray at the temples, and he carried a camera bag that looked older than most of the guests in the room. To the people who mattered, the executives, the socialites, the donors, he was invisible. Which was exactly how they wanted it. The Grand Aurelian Hotel glittered that night, every crystal chandelier blazing, every table draped in white silk and gold trim. A charity gala for the city's most powerful figures was underway, politicians, CEOs, influencers, celebrities, and heirs to fortunes old enough to have footnotes in history books. And at the center of it all stood Victoria Hale, founder of the Hale Foundation and self-appointed queen of the city's philanthropic elite. She noticed everything. Everything except him. "Who let the media inside already?" she asked sharply, glancing toward the man adjusting a lens near the edge of the dance floor. Her assistant leaned closer. "He's not media, ma'am. Just the photographer." Victoria's lips tightened. "Then someone needs to remind him this is a formal event." Across the room, the photographer didn't look up. He crouched slightly, adjusting his angle as a server passed with champagne flutes. His movements were calm, practiced, almost meditative. He wasn't shooting the guests. He was studying them, watching who talked to whom, who avoided eye contact, who controlled the room without raising their voice. A security guard approached him with a bored expression. "You're supposed to stay near the stage," the guard muttered. The photographer nodded politely. "Of course." He didn't move. Not right away. Instead, he lifted the camera and captured a single frame. Victoria Hale mid-sentence, her smile tight, her eyes cold, her fingers gripping a champagne flute like a weapon disguised as glass. Then he lowered the camera and walked toward the stage. Victoria had built her empire on perception. To the public, she was generosity incarnate, funding hospitals, scholarships, disaster relief. Newspapers called her the city's guardian angel. Those who worked for her knew better. She was ruthless, demanding, intolerant of weakness, and especially intolerant of embarrassment. Tonight mattered. Cameras from major networks would arrive later for the keynote speech, and every detail had to be flawless. So when she noticed the photographer again, standing too close to the VIP table, his jacket wrinkled, his posture too relaxed, irritation flared. "You," she said sharply. Heads turned. The room quieted just enough for humiliation to travel faster than sound. The photographer looked up slowly. "Yes." "Who hired you?" she asked. "The event coordinator." "And did they tell you this is a black tie gala?" His eyes flicked down at his clothes, then back to hers. "Come." Almost amused. "They did. Then you chose to ignore it?" A murmur rippled through nearby guests. Some smiled politely. Others watched with the hungry curiosity people reserve for public takedowns. "I chose to prioritize mobility," he replied evenly. Victoria's jaw tightened. "You look unprofessional." He didn't respond, which irritated her more. "This event represents the most influential people in the city," she continued. "We expect a certain standard." "I understand." "Good," she said coldly. "Then stay out of the way." A few guests chuckled softly. Someone whispered, "These freelancers." The photographer inclined his head slightly, as if accepting instructions from a superior. But when she turned away, he lifted the camera again and photographed her back. Across the ballroom, a young waitress named Lena watched the exchange with a knot in her stomach. She had seen this before. Powerful people speaking to workers like they were furniture. The photographer didn't look angry. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked patient. As if none of this mattered. As if he had time. The evening progressed. Speeches, laughter, clinking glasses. Victoria moved from group to group, flawless and commanding, basking in admiration. The photographer moved too. Always present. Always quiet. Always observing. At one point he stepped outside onto the terrace overlooking the city. The skyline shimmered below, towers of glass and steel reflecting the last embers of sunset. He removed a small device from his pocket, not a phone, not quite, and checked something on the screen. Satisfied, he slipped it away. Behind him, Lena stepped out to catch her breath. "You shouldn't be out here," she said nervously. "Staff are supposed to stay inside." He smiled faintly. "Then we'll both pretend we didn't see each other." She hesitated. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. She can be harsh. "I'm fine," he said. I've been called worse. You don't seem like you care. I care, he said. Just not about the same things. She frowned, unsure what that meant. Before she could ask, the doors opened again. Photographer, a coordinator called. We need you inside for the announcement. He nodded and returned without another word. The announcement was the centerpiece of the night. Victoria stepped onto the stage, radiant in a floor-length silver gown, diamonds catching the light like tiny explosions. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice rich with practiced warmth, tonight we celebrate compassion, generosity, and the power of those fortunate enough to give back. Applause thundered. The photographer stood near the front, camera lowered now, eyes fixed on her. Together, she continued, we have raised over $12 million for the Children's Hospital expansion. More applause. More admiration. More cameras flashing. Then, a sound cut through the room. Not loud. Not dramatic. But unmistakable. A sharp electronic tone. Victoria faltered. What is that? She asked. No one answered. The photographer stepped forward. Not aggressively. Not hurriedly. Just, forward. Security moved immediately. Sir, you need to step back. He didn't. Instead, he reached into his jacket and produced a small black badge. He held it up calmly. Everything changed. The head of security froze. His expression shifted from annoyance to shock. Then to something dangerously close to fear. Stand down, the guard whispered to his team. Victoria frowned. What is going on? The photographer lowered the badge and spoke clearly. Ladies and gentlemen, I need everyone to leave the ballroom immediately. Silence crashed down like a physical force. Someone laughed nervously. This isn't funny. Victoria's eyes flashed. You don't give orders here. He met her gaze, steady, unflinching. Yes, he said quietly. I do. The room held its breath. On whose authority? She demanded. He slipped the badge back into his pocket. National Security Directorate. Gasps erupted. Victoria's face drained of color, but pride kept her voice sharp. This is a charity event, not a crime scene. Not yet, he replied. A ripple of panic spread through the crowd. What do you mean, not yet? He didn't answer. Instead, he looked around the room, at the chandeliers, the exits, the hidden corners. Then back at her. Please, he said, voice softer now. Evacuate everyone. Something in his tone made the request feel less like an order, and more like a warning. Victoria hesitated. For the first time all night, uncertainty flickered across her face. What's happening? She asked quietly. His expression didn't change. That, he said, depends on how quickly you listen. Outside, sirens began to wail in the distance. Growing louder. Closer. The photographer stepped aside, clearing a path to the doors. Everyone out, he said again. And this time, people moved. Victoria stood frozen on the stage, watching the room she controlled dissolve into chaos. Guests rushing, security shouting, chairs scraping, fear spreading like wildfire. As she stepped down, she found herself face to face with the man she had dismissed only minutes earlier. Up close, his eyes were not calm anymore. They were focused, sharp, dangerous. Who are you? She whispered. He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, someone who just saved your life. The secret behind the camera. Victoria Hale had faced hostile boardrooms, political adversaries, even public scandals. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had ever made her feel the way she did in that moment. Powerless. The ballroom she had commanded only minutes earlier was now dissolving into chaos. Guests in couture gowns stumbled over chairs. Waitstaff abandoned trays. Security shouted conflicting orders. Someone cried. Someone else demanded answers. Outside, sirens screamed closer, not one or two but many. Victoria turned back to the photographer. He hadn't moved. He stood in the center aisle like the eye of a storm, calm while everything around him unraveled. Saved my life, she repeated, her voice thinner than she intended. From what? He didn't answer immediately. His gaze tracked the crowd, counting, assessing. Are there any guests still inside private rooms? He asked. What? VIP lounges. Restrooms. Offices. Yes, she snapped. Of course there are. This hotel has 20 private suites. He pulled a small device from his pocket, not quite a phone, not quite a radio, and spoke into it. Primary ballroom evacuation in progress. Initiate secondary sweep. A calm voice crackled back, barely audible. Copy. Teams en route. Victoria stared at him. You weren't kidding. No. She stepped closer, anger returning like armor snapping back into place. You don't get to storm my event, terrify my guests, and refuse to explain. His eyes met hers again, steady, unreadable. Miss Hale, if I had explained, you would have argued. Her mouth opened. Close. Because he was right. Within minutes, black vehicles screeched to a halt outside the hotel entrance. Men and women in tactical gear poured out, efficient, silent, terrifyingly coordinated. Guests pressed against the lobby walls as they flooded inside. Some people protested. Some tried to film. Phones were politely but firmly lowered. Please remain calm, an agent repeated. You are not in danger. Victoria followed the photographer toward the exit, heels clicking sharply against marble floors. Even now she refused to run. Outside, the night air felt cold and unreal. Ambulances idled. Police cordoned off the street. Lights flashed red and blue across the hotel's grand facade. Her gala. Her triumph. Reduced to a crime scene. She turned to him again. This is insane. He scanned the upper floors, ignoring her. What are you looking for? She demanded. Confirmation. Of what? That we're not too late. A sudden explosion of noise erupted from inside. Not a blast, not destruction, but a sharp metallic crash like something heavy falling. People screamed. Victoria flinched despite herself. Agents rushed toward the entrance. Her heart slammed against her ribs. What was that? She whispered. Probably nothing, he said. Probably. She grabbed his arm. Her fingers tightened around leather. Stop speaking in riddles. Tell me what is happening. For the first time he looked directly at her, not as a nuisance, not as an obstacle, but as a person. A device was placed inside the ballroom, he said quietly. The world tilted. A bomb? Not exactly. Then what? Something designed to kill a specific target. Her throat went dry. Who? He didn't answer. Because they both knew. No, she said, shaking her head. No, that's impossible. Who would? You have enemies, he said gently. Everyone in my position has critics. This wasn't criticism. Her mind raced. Business rivals. Political grudges. Lawsuits. Failed partnerships. Angry donors. Too many possibilities. Why didn't security find it? They weren't looking for the right thing. And you were? Yes. How? He hesitated. Then said quietly. Because I've seen this method before. Across the street, Lena, the waitress, stood trembling with the other staff members. She watched the photographer and Victoria from a distance, confusion etched across her face. That man. He didn't look like any photographer she had ever seen. Agents treated him like a commander. Not a contractor. Not an employee. A superior. Victoria crossed her arms, fighting the cold and the fear. If this was an attempt on my life, she said, then you owe me the truth. He studied her for a long moment, as if deciding something. Finally he sighed. My name isn't on the event contract, he said. I figured. I wasn't hired to take pictures. Clearly. I was assigned to protect you. The words landed like a physical blow. Protect me? Yes. By pretending to be a photographer? It allowed me to stay close without alarming anyone. Victoria laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. So all night while I was humiliating you, you were actually doing my job. Her stomach dropped. She remembered every word she had said. You look unprofessional. Stay out of the way. We expect a certain standard. Heat crept up her neck. You could have told me. And compromised the operation? No. Her voice softened, almost involuntarily. I didn't know. I know. No accusation. No resentment. Just fact. And somehow that made it worse. Sirens faded as more units arrived. The hotel was now fully surrounded. A senior officer approached, speaking quietly to the photographer. Device located. Disarmed. Forensics team is securing it now. Relief washed through Victoria so suddenly her knees almost buckled. Disarmed. She was alive. The officer glanced at her with professional curiosity, then back to him. We'll need to relocate the principal. Victoria blinked. The what? The principal, he repeated, nodding toward her. She stared at the photographer. You mean me? Yes. Relocate me where? Somewhere safe. I'm not going anywhere, she snapped automatically. The photographer's expression hardened slightly. Ms. Hale, this wasn't random. I gathered that. It means whoever did this may try again. The implication hung heavy in the air. Again. She looked back at the hotel, at the chaos, the flashing lights, the shattered illusion of control. Her entire life had been built on strength, independence, authority. And now strangers were telling her she needed protection. "I have security," she said stubbornly. "Not for this. I have resources." So did the last target. Her breath caught. Last target? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You don't hire people like me unless the threat is serious." A chill ran down her spine. "Who are you?" she whispered. He hesitated, then said quietly, "I'm the one they send when the threat is already inside the room." A black SUV pulled up beside them. An agent opened the rear door. "Vehicle is secure." Victoria didn't move. Her eyes remained locked on the man who had been invisible just hours earlier. The man she had dismissed, belittled, ordered around. "You said you saved my life," she said slowly. "I did. And now you're telling me I don't get to go home? Not tonight." Her voice trembled despite her effort to steady it. "Do I at least get your real name?" For the first time, something like hesitation flickered across his face. Then he said, "Daniel Cross." The name meant nothing to her, but it sounded solid, dangerous, final. She nodded slowly. "All right, Mr. Cross." He held her gaze. "Daniel is fine." Something shifted in her chest, a strange mix of fear, gratitude, and something she couldn't name. She climbed into the SUV. He followed, closing the door behind them. As the vehicle pulled away from the flashing lights and the ruins of her perfect evening, Victoria realized something that terrified her more than the bomb had. For the first time in decades, she had absolutely no control, and the only person she could rely on was the man she had treated like he didn't matter. Inside the darkened hotel ballroom, forensic teams worked quietly. One technician lifted a small device from the floor, sleek, sophisticated, almost elegant in its design. Not a bomb. Not a random weapon. Something far more precise. "Whoever built this," the technician muttered, "knew exactly what they were doing." Another agent examined the targeting system. His expression hardened. This wasn't meant for the crowd. He turned the device slightly. A single name glowed faintly on the embedded screen. Victoria Hale. Meanwhile, in the moving SUV, Victoria sat rigidly, hands clasped in her lap. Daniel Cross watched the street through the tinted window, every muscle alert. She finally spoke. "Why me?" He didn't look at her. "Someone believes your death would be very valuable." Her stomach twisted. "And you're supposed to stop them." "Yes." Silence stretched. Then she asked quietly, "And if you can't?" He turned to her at last. His eyes were calm, but not comforting. "Then I die trying." Her breath caught. Because he didn't sound heroic. He sounded certain. The man who was never supposed to exist. The SUV drove in silence. Not the comfortable kind. Not even the tense kind. This was the silence of two people whose lives had collided violently, leaving both unsure where the ground was anymore. Victoria stared at her reflection in the tinted window, pale, shaken, stripped of the flawless composure she had worn like armor for decades. Across from her, Daniel Cross sat perfectly still. Not scrolling his phone. Not fidgeting. Not trying to make conversation. Watching. Always watching. Every passing car. Every pedestrian. Every shadow. As if danger could materialize from thin air. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. "Are you going to tell me where we're going?" "Safe house." "That's not a location." "It doesn't need to be." Her jaw tightened. "I'm not a hostage." "No," he said calmly. "You're the target." The words landed harder than anything else that night. The vehicle turned off the main road, then another, weaving through increasingly quiet neighborhoods until the city lights thinned and darkness swallowed the streets. Victoria's pulse quickened. "This doesn't look like any safe house I've ever seen." "That's the idea." The SUV slowed, then stopped in front of what appeared to be an ordinary residential building, 3 stories, aging brick, dim porch light flickering. No guards. No gates. No sign of wealth or security. "You're joking," she said. "I don't joke." He stepped out, scanned the street, then opened her door. "Stay close." Inside, the apartment was simple, almost shockingly so. Clean. Functional. Minimal furniture. No art. No personal items. No evidence anyone actually lived there. Victoria stepped inside cautiously. "This is where you bring billionaires to hide?" "This is where I bring people who need to disappear." He locked the door, checked the windows, then placed a small device on the table. It emitted a faint hum. "What's that?" "Signal jammer." She exhaled slowly. So I'm officially cut off from the world. For now. Her phone vibrated in her hand, dozens of missed calls, messages, notifications exploding across the screen. News alerts. Social media. Her name everywhere. Gala evacuated after security incident. Philanthropist Victoria Hale unaccounted for. Terror threat at Aurelian Hotel. Her chest tightened. My board will be panicking. They'll survive. My foundation will still exist tomorrow. She looked up sharply. You don't understand. Thousands of people depend on me. His expression didn't change. And right now they depend on you staying alive. She sank into the nearest chair, heels clicking softly on the floor. For the first time since the explosion of chaos began, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Why didn't you stop it before it started? She asked quietly. He leaned against the wall, arms folded. Because whoever did this wanted you inside that room. So if we'd shut down the event early, they would have adapted. Her stomach twisted. They were watching. Yes. The implication was suffocating. Someone out there had studied her schedule, her movements, her habits. Planned her death with precision. Do you know who? She whispered. No. Then how can you protect me? Because I know how they think. She studied him. You've done this before. Many times. Protected people? He didn't answer immediately. Finally he said, "Stop threats." Something in his tone made her skin prickle. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The city outside grew quieter. Victoria paced, unable to sit still. Daniel didn't move. You haven't asked me any questions, she said suddenly. I don't need to. That's impossible. Everything I need to know is already in the files. Her stomach dropped. Files? Your business dealings. Personal history. Travel patterns. Known associates. You investigated me. I prepared. She crossed her arms, defensive. And what did you find? That you're efficient. That's a diplomatic way of saying cold. He tilted his head slightly. Is it inaccurate? She hesitated. No. Silence again. Then softly. Why do you do this? He looked at her, surprised by the question. Because it's my job. No, she said, shaking her head. I mean, why you? People with your skills could make millions in the private sector. I'm not interested in money. Everyone is interested in money. Not everyone. Her eyes narrowed. Then what are you interested in? He held her gaze for a long moment. Results. The word carried weight. Finality. Something darker than ambition. A sudden knock at the door shattered the stillness. Victoria jumped. Daniel didn't. He moved in a blur, silent, controlled, lethal, positioning himself beside the door, hand already reaching behind his jacket. He looked through the peephole. Relaxed slightly. Opened the door just enough to accept a sealed case from a man in plain clothes. No words exchanged. Door closed again. Victoria stared. Who was that? Support. What's in the case? Equipment. He set it on the table and opened it. Inside lay items that made her blood run cold. Firearms. Medical supplies. Encrypted devices. Body armor. This is insane, she whispered. This is preparation. He removed a compact earpiece and inserted it. Cross online, he said quietly. A voice responded through the tiny speaker. Status. Principal secure. Principal. That word again. She wasn't Victoria Hale here. She was an objective. A mission parameter. She watched him assemble the equipment with practiced ease. Movements so smooth they looked almost ritualistic. You've done this too many times, she said softly. He didn't deny it. Comes with experience. How old are you? 42. She blinked. You look younger. Stress ages you selectively. She almost smiled. Almost. Then her gaze fell on something else inside the case. A small metal tag attached to a chain. Engraved. What? Personal. She picked it up before she could stop herself. Who is this? She asked. A photograph was embedded inside. A young girl, maybe 8 or 9, smiling brightly at the camera. Daniel froze. For the first time since she'd met him, his composure cracked. Put that down. Not angry. Not loud. But absolute. Carefully she returned it to the case. I'm sorry. He closed the lid. Too quickly. Too firmly. That was a mistake, he said quietly. I didn't mean. I know. But his voice had changed. Colder. Guarded. Like a door had slammed shut. Hours later, Victoria sat curled on the sofa, staring into nothing. Her mind replayed the night on a loop. The humiliation. The chaos. The realization that someone wanted her dead. And the stranger who had stepped out of nowhere to save her. "Daniel?" she said softly. He was standing by the window, barely visible in the darkness. "Yes. Thank you." He didn't turn. "For what?" "For not letting me die." A long pause. Then, "You don't thank someone for doing their job." "I do." Silence again. Then she added quietly, "I misjudged you." Finally he looked at her. His eyes softened just a fraction. "Most people do." Suddenly his earpiece crackled. He went rigid. "Repeat that," he said sharply. Victoria's pulse spiked. "What is it?" He didn't answer. He listened. And whatever he heard drained the color from his face. "That's not possible," he said. Another pause. Then quietly, "Understood." He removed the earpiece slowly. Victoria stood. "Daniel, what's wrong?" He looked at her, really looked this time, with something close to disbelief. "They know where you are." Her blood ran cold. "How?" "This location was supposed to be untraceable." Panic surged. "Then we need to leave." "Yes. But how did they find us?" His jaw tightened. "There's only one explanation." Her voice trembled. "What?" He stepped toward her, every movement precise. "Someone inside your circle gave them your security profile." The words hit like a physical blow. "A traitor?" she whispered. He didn't soften it. "Yes." Her knees buckled slightly. "But I trust those people. That's why it works." A faint sound echoed from outside. Footsteps. Multiple. Slow. Deliberate. Victoria's breath hitched. Daniel moved instantly, grabbing his weapon, guiding her behind him. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The doorknob rattled. Once. Twice. Then stopped. Silence. Victoria clutched his sleeve, heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. "Daniel?" He didn't respond. His focus was absolute. Deadly. Waiting. A voice spoke from the other side of the door, calm, almost conversational. "Miss Hale, we know you're in there." Her stomach dropped. "We don't want to hurt anyone else." Us. Her fingers tightened on Daniel's arm. He didn't flinch. "We just want you." Daniel leaned slightly toward her, voice barely audible. "No matter what happens, don't run unless I tell you." Her throat closed. "What are you going to do?" His eyes were calm. Terrifyingly calm. "What I was sent to do." Outside, the voice continued. "You can come out peacefully, or we can come in." A metallic click echoed through the hallway. Victoria realized what it was. A weapon being chambered. Her legs nearly gave out. Inside the apartment, Daniel Cross stepped forward. And for the first time she saw the man behind the quiet photographer. Not invisible. Not overlooked. But something far more dangerous. Something that made armed attackers hesitate before crossing a threshold. Something that had been hiding in plain sight all along. He raised his weapon. And spoke loud enough for the people outside to hear. "Last warning." His voice carried no fear. No anger. Only certainty. "Leave." Silence. Then the voice outside laughed softly. "No." Daniel's eyes hardened. "Your choice." Victoria's heart stopped. Because she realized something terrifying. He wasn't bluffing. The truth: no one was meant to survive. The hallway outside the apartment went silent. Not empty. Not safe. Silent in the way a jungle goes quiet when a predator steps into the clearing. Victoria's fingers trembled where they clutched Daniel's sleeve. She could feel the tension in his muscles, coiled, ready, lethal. "Daniel?" she whispered. He didn't look back. "Stay low." The words weren't loud, but they carried absolute authority. Then, the door handle jerked violently. Once. Twice. On the third pull, the lock snapped. The door burst inward. Everything happened at once. A masked man rushed in with a weapon raised, and was thrown backward as Daniel fired a precise, deafening shot into the floor directly in front of him. The attacker stumbled, losing balance, crashing into the hallway wall. Not a kill shot. A warning. "Down." Daniel roared. Victoria dropped instinctively, covering her ears as chaos exploded. Another attacker lunged through the doorway. Daniel moved faster than she could process, a blur of controlled violence. A sharp strike to the wrist sent the weapon skidding across the floor. A pivot. A blow to the chest that drove the air from the man's lungs. The attacker collapsed, gasping. Two more shadows hesitated in the hall. They had expected fear. Confusion. Easy prey. Instead, they found a man who looked like he had been waiting his entire life for this moment. Daniel stepped into the doorway, weapon steady. "You've made a mistake," he said quietly. The calmness in his voice was more frightening than shouting. One of the intruders recovered first and fired. The shot slammed into the doorframe inches from Daniel's head. Victoria screamed. Daniel didn't even flinch. He fired once. The attacker's weapon spun out of his hand as the bullet struck the metal slide, shattering it. Surgical precision. Not trying to kill. Just to disable. "Next one goes through your shoulder," Daniel said evenly. Silence. The remaining attackers exchanged uncertain glances. These weren't hardened professionals anymore. They were scared. Because they realized something crucial. They weren't fighting a bodyguard. They were facing something far worse. Footsteps thundered up the stairwell. More people. Victoria's hope flickered. Reinforcements? Daniel's jaw tightened. "No," he murmured. "What?" she whispered. "That's too many." Then a new voice echoed from the hall. Smooth. Confident. Familiar. "Stand down, gentlemen." The attackers lowered their weapons instantly. A man stepped into view, impeccably dressed, composed, completely at odds with the chaos. Victoria's breath caught. Andrew? Andrew Collins. Her foundation's chief financial officer. Her right hand. Her trusted advisor for nearly 10 years. He smiled warmly. "Hello, Victoria." The world tilted. You did this?" she stammered. Andrew sighed as if inconvenienced. "Please don't make this melodramatic. You tried to kill me?" "Not tried," he corrected calmly. "Planned." Her stomach lurched. "Why?" "Because you were in the way." Daniel didn't lower his weapon. Andrew noticed. "And you must be the famous Mr. Cross," he said conversationally. "We wondered how long it would take before they sent you." "You've done your research," Daniel replied coldly. "Of course. It's difficult to eliminate someone when a ghost is protecting them." Victoria blinked. "A ghost?" Andrew chuckled. "Oh, you really don't know, do you?" She turned to Daniel, confusion and fear colliding. "What is he talking about?" Andrew answered for him. "Daniel Cross doesn't officially exist." Her breath caught. "He has no public records. No social security number. No military history on file. No birthplace. No family. Nothing." He tilted his head, smiling thinly. Almost like he was erased. Victoria stared at Daniel. "Is that true?" Daniel's silence was confirmation enough. Andrew paced slowly, hands behind his back like a lecturer. "You see, Victoria, your foundation was profitable. Too profitable. Billions flowing through international channels. So many opportunities for adjustments." "You stole from the hospital funds?" she whispered, horrified. He looked offended. "Reallocated. You monster." "I prefer visionary." Her chest heaved with rage and betrayal. "All those children, all those people who trusted us." Andrew's expression hardened. "Sentimentality is expensive." Daniel stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between them. "Walk away," he said. Andrew laughed. "You're not in a position to negotiate. I'm giving you a chance." "Why?" Andrew asked curiously. Daniel's eyes were ice. "Because she deserves to see justice done in court." Andrew smiled slowly. "How noble." Then his gaze sharpened. "But you won't live long enough to testify." Victoria grabbed Daniel's arm, panic surging. "There are too many of them." He didn't look back. "I know." "Then we need to run." "Not yet." "Daniel. Trust me." Something in his voice stopped her. Absolute confidence. Not reckless. Not desperate. Certain. Andrew checked his watch. "We're running out of time." He nodded to his men. "Remove Mr. Cross." Weapons rose. Victoria's heart slammed against her ribs. "Stop," she screamed. Everyone froze. She stepped forward, voice shaking but fierce. "You don't need to hurt him. I'll come with you." Daniel's head snapped toward her. "No." Andrew smiled approvingly. "See? She's practical." Victoria met Daniel's eyes. "If this is about me, then let him go." For the first time, emotion flashed across his face. Not fear, not anger. Something deeper. "No," he said again, softer this time. Andrew sighed. "Touching. Truly. But unnecessary." He lifted a hand. And that was when it happened. A thunderous crash from the stairwell door. Flashlights flooded the hallway. Commands barked in sharp, disciplined voices. "Drop your weapons." Andrew's smile vanished. Daniel didn't look surprised. Victoria realized with a jolt, He had been stalling. Agents flooded the corridor, weapons trained, movements precise and overwhelming. Andrew's men froze, outnumbered in seconds. Andrew slowly raised his hands, expression dark. "Well played," he muttered. Daniel lowered his weapon at last. Victoria's knees gave out. He caught her before she hit the floor. "It's over," he said quietly. As Andrew was handcuffed and led away, he turned back with a bitter smile. "You think this ends tonight?" Daniel didn't respond. Andrew's eyes shifted to Victoria. "You built something extraordinary, you know. Too bad it will collapse without me." Victoria lifted her chin despite the tremor in her voice. "Then I'll rebuild it." For the first time, Andrew looked uncertain. When the hallway finally cleared, Victoria found herself sitting on the apartment floor, trembling uncontrollably. Daniel crouched beside her. "You're safe." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I trusted him. I know. I humiliated you tonight, and you still—" He shook his head. "That doesn't matter." "It does to me." Her voice broke. "Why would you risk your life for someone who treated you like that?" He hesitated, then answered quietly. "Because you didn't deserve what he planned. Not heroic, not dramatic, just simple truth." Outside, dawn began to break, pale light seeping through the windows. Victoria looked at him through blurred vision. "What happens now?" "You testify. The investigation unfolds. Your organization survives. And you?" He stood slowly. "I disappear." Her chest tightened. "Just like that. That's how this works." Panic surged, surprising, unwelcome, undeniable. "I don't even know who you are." He met her gaze. "You know enough." "No," she said softly. "I don't." A long silence passed. Then she asked the question she had been afraid to voice. "Will I ever see you again?" Daniel Cross, the man who had appeared as a nobody, saved her life, fought for her, and shattered her world, looked at her with something almost like sadness. "I hope not." Her heart sank. "Why?" His voice was gentle. "Because if you do, it means you're in danger again." He turned toward the door. Victoria watched him go, the weight of everything crashing down at once. The betrayal, the fear, the realization of how wrong she had been about him. "Daniel." He stopped. She swallowed hard. "Thank you, for not leaving when I told you to stay out of the way." A faint smile touched his lips. "Someone had to ignore you." He stepped into the hallway. And just like that, the man she had dismissed as insignificant was gone, leaving behind a truth she would never forget. The most powerful person in the room had been the one no one bothered to see. The moment she finally understood, the city woke up to headlines. Foundation CFO arrested in assassination plot. Billions in fraud uncovered. Philanthropist Victoria Hale survives targeted attack. News helicopters circled the skyline. Commentators speculated. Analysts dissected every detail of her empire, her finances, her leadership. But Victoria Hale heard almost none of it. She sat alone in her office, not the grand conference room, not the public spaces she normally ruled, but a smaller private room overlooking the city. The blinds were half drawn. Her phone buzzed nonstop on the desk. She didn't touch it. For the first time in decades, she had nothing to say. Andrew Collins had confessed within hours. Not out of remorse. Out of calculation. Evidence against him was overwhelming. Offshore accounts, shell companies, falsified records. He had siphoned millions over years, planning to disappear once the final transfer cleared. But Victoria's presence at the gala had complicated things. She had started asking questions. Not directly accusing him, just noticing inconsistencies. That was enough. She was becoming a liability, Andrew told investigators coldly. So he arranged the device. A silent, targeted kill. Public enough to look like tragedy. Clean enough to bury the truth. Except, Daniel Cross had been there. Victoria leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. She remembered every moment now with painful clarity. His calm. His patience. The way he endured her condescension without reacting. The way he stepped forward when everyone else stepped back. The way he caught her before she fell. Her throat tightened. "I didn't even say goodbye," she whispered to the empty room. Days passed. Security remained tight. Investigators came and went. Board members demanded reassurance. Donors demanded explanations. Staff members cried in hallways, terrified for the future. And Victoria did something no one expected. She listened. Really listened. To the nurses describing underfunded wards. To the parents waiting months for treatment approvals. To the employees who admitted they had been too afraid to question Andrew's decisions, she realized something devastating. Her foundation had grown so large, so powerful, that she had stopped seeing the people inside it. Just like she hadn't seen Daniel. One evening, long after everyone else had gone home, she found herself wandering through the hospital wing funded by her own organization. Machines hummed softly. A nurse nodded politely as she passed. In one room, a young boy slept, oxygen tube resting beneath his nose. His mother sat beside the bed, exhaustion etched into her face. Victoria lingered in the doorway. "Is he okay?" she asked softly. The woman looked up, surprised. "He will be," she said. "Because of this place." Her eyes filled with tears. "They told us we might lose him if we couldn't afford surgery. Then the foundation approved everything." Victoria swallowed hard. "I'm glad. You saved his life," the woman said simply. The words hit differently now. Not like praise. Like responsibility. As she turned to leave, she noticed something on the bedside table. A small disposable camera. Old-fashioned. Plastic. "Do people still use those?" she asked. The mother smiled faintly. "He wanted to take pictures of everything while he's here. Says he doesn't want to forget what it felt like to get better." Victoria stared at it. A camera. Not expensive. Not powerful. But meaningful. She remembered another camera. Worn leather strap. Scuffed edges. Held by a man no one bothered to look at twice. Back in her office, she opened her desk drawer. Inside lay an envelope delivered anonymously that morning. No return address. No note. Just photographs. Her breath caught as she spread them across the desk. Images from the gala. Not the staged publicity shots. Real moments. A waiter laughing with a guest. A nervous donor fidgeting before a speech. A child from the hospital program hugging a nurse. And one photo of Victoria herself, not posed, not smiling for cameras. She was standing alone near the window, expression thoughtful, almost vulnerable. She didn't remember that moment. But he had seen it. He had seen her. At the bottom of the stack was one final photograph. Taken outside the hotel. Her face pale, shaken, standing amid flashing lights. And behind her, slightly out of focus, Daniel Cross watching the perimeter. Alert. Protective. Invisible. Tears blurred her vision. "He was working even then," she whispered. She turned the photo over. 2 words were written on the back in neat, precise handwriting. "Stay safe." No signature. None needed. Weeks later, life began to stabilize. Andrew faced trial. Funds were recovered. New oversight committees were formed. Victoria restructured the entire foundation, implementing transparency measures that would have made the old version of herself uncomfortable. But she no longer cared about comfort. She cared about doing it right. One afternoon, she stood before a packed press conference. Cameras flashed. Microphones crowded the podium. "For years," she said, voice steady, "I believed leadership meant control. Authority. Perfection." She paused. "I was wrong." Murmurs rippled through the room. True leadership means humility. Listening. Recognizing that every person, no matter their role, deserves respect. Her eyes swept across the crowd. Because sometimes, the person you overlook is the one protecting you. The room fell silent. Later that night, she returned home to her penthouse overlooking the city. For the first time in weeks, the quiet felt peaceful instead of empty. She stepped onto the balcony. Wind tugged at her hair. Far below, traffic flowed like rivers of light. "Wherever you are," she murmured into the darkness, "I hope you're safe too." She didn't expect an answer. None came. But something shifted inside her chest. Not closure, not certainty. Acceptance. Across the city, in a crowded train station, a man in a dark jacket watched passengers board. Clean-shaven now. Different haircut. Different posture. Unremarkable. Invisible. He carried only a small duffel bag and a camera case. A television mounted above the platform showed highlights from the press conference. Victoria's speech played silently on the screen. He watched for a moment. Just a moment. A faint smile touched his lips. Then the train doors opened. He stepped inside. And disappeared into the crowd. Back on the balcony, Victoria turned to go inside. But something caught her eye. On the small table beside the chair sat an object that hadn't been there before. Her heart skipped. A camera. Scuffed. Leather strap worn smooth from years of use. Hands trembling, she picked it up. Inside the battery compartment was a folded piece of paper. She opened it carefully. One final message. Keep looking closer. She pressed the camera to her chest, tears falling freely now. Not from fear. Not from grief. From understanding. Because she finally knew the truth. Power isn't always loud. Protection doesn't always announce itself. And the people who change your life most are often the ones you almost never see.